A dry-wet mix knob is nice as it allows you to mix in a certain effect like distortion, compression, or reverb, but sometimes a plugin won't have that knob. In FL Studio, each effect slot comes with its own mix knob so that you can always use this. Plus, you don't even need to open the plugin. However, in Ableton, you don't have this. Fortunately, there's a solution to this you may have seen. I've even covered it before. An audio effect rack has these things called chains. It's like splitting the signal into a parallel stream, and each chain can have its own set of plugins running in parallel. However, you can also switch and even fade between these chains. So if one chain has the plugin and another chain is empty, you've effectively made your own dry-wet mix knob. When the chain selector knob is at the bottom, we only hear the dry signal, no effect. And as we move it to the other side, the dry signal gets quieter, but the wet signal, with the effect, gets louder until it's only the wet signal left over. There's one problem here that people sometimes point out. Let's mix between the two chains when they're both empty. You'd think that because there's nothing on either chain, the volume will stay consistent throughout. But that's not the case. Around the center, the volume is 3 decibels louder. So how these chains are adding up isn't perfect. You'd expect the volume to transition like this. So 50% of the volume from 2 chains would add up to 100% volume. But in reality, it's more like this. You can see that where they intersect is above 50%. So both of them together add up to something that's above 100%. Now, in almost every tutorial I found, nobody seemed to be addressing this problem. I like this one comment that makes it kind of seem like it's a conspiracy to try covering up the issue. When I included this trick in my tutorial, it wasn't really the main focus of the video, just a little trick I recently found out, but I had also never tested it with 2 empty chains because I just assumed that being at 50% would mean 50% of the volume. I think that's a normal assumption. And it's very possible that these producers just assumed the same thing. So I'm not throwing shade at any of these producers here. Especially not Decap, as he's shouted out Jukebox multiple times. For that, I'm extremely grateful. If you want to see a lot more Ableton content, please go give him a follow. Also guys, I'm about to have a hot take here, so brace yourself. I think using the rack with this issue is fine. It's likely that the output of the wet chain isn't going to be the same volume as the dry signal anyways, especially if you're mixing in distortion or compression. Plus, you still have ears. If you think it's too loud, you can always just turn it down. But if you think that the extra 3 decibels might subconsciously bias your opinion, well, I agree with you. I think that's a valid concern. Plus, there may be situations where you just need to keep the volume very consistent. So what can we do about that? Obviously, we need to balance out this fading mechanism so that it more resembles this shape. I actually went searching for the solution here. That's why I came across a lot of videos that didn't address this issue. But even the videos that do say volume fix didn't actually fix the issue. The only solution that I found was a link to this ancient 2018 post in a kind of funny looking blog. This person explains the problem and shares their neutral dry-wet rack that seemingly fixes the problem. And upon actually trying it out, this was a very good result. What they've done is they've mapped the chain's volume down by 6 decibel, and it does a very good job of counteracting the initial problem. It's not perfect, but the margin of error is less than 0.1 decibels. I found that in the middle it's a perfect mix, but at the sides it can get up to around 0.04 decibel. But that's so tiny. You're not gonna hear the difference between that. You don't believe me? Well, let's do a little test. I'm gonna play 2 beeps, but one of the beeps is 0.1 decibel louder than the other, and you tell me which one, okay? Let's go. See, you can't hear the difference. And if you said you can, I was lying. I was actually playing the same audio twice. You are imagining things. Please seek help. Now, why isn't it perfect? The problem, I think, is the rounding of these mapped values. Minus 6.021. For those who don't know, if you reduce the volume by 6 decibel, you're effectively halving the volume. Except that 6 decibel is a rounded number. You need to use the decimal equation to get the actual full number. So you take 0.5, because if you times something by 0.5, that's just like dividing it by 2 or halving it. You put that into log 10 and times it by 20. And the result is the change in decibels. So now you can see the full result, which is minus 6.0205999, and so on. That's the actual value that we need. But you can see that the 205 has been rounded up to 21, which is what I think is creating the rounding error. It's minor, but I did actually try to find a solution to this problem. I spent a day coming up with some wacky solutions, like having multiple nested chains all linked to the mix knob, or using the mix knob of the compressor when the output is set to minus 6 point blah blah blah. But the best I could do was to get it as good as the neutral dry wet rack. Never better, just as good, while being much more complicated to set up. So it didn't really work out for me. But like I said, the neutral dry wet rack is already good enough. Especially when comparing it to the original rack, it's miles better. So why did I bother trying to make it perfect? Well, it loops back round to the beginning. Remember that mix knob in FL Studio? I just recently implemented the functionality of converting that value, even with automation, in my FL Studio to Ableton converter. The only solution was to create its own audio effect rack in Ableton and automate that instead. That little feature is what led me down this rabbit hole. The Jukebox converter has made big changes recently by finally being able to work with groups, buses, chained mixer tracks, and even sends when they're docked to the right. It was a long time coming, but adds a lot more depth and better conversions. It's accessible with the new features option. Another thank you to everyone who continues to support me on Jukebox. I may seem distant because of the lack of videos, but I'm always working on something new over there, and at the very least I hope it shows. I've included a link to the blog that features the neutral dry wet rack. Plus the blog still gets updated frequently to this very day, with many other posts and audio effect racks, so it's worth checking out. The light has now been found. We've finally found the solution, and it's finally on youtube.com. We've made history. No more shall we be confused about what's going on. Now we have a solution, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time, whenever that is, in the future. Goodbye.